Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon so that you know when live we go. Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified. In the next 40 minutes, I'm going to ride you through today's newspaper, The Hindu, Delhi edition, and we shall discuss the important articles for civil service examination. The articles that we shall take up for discussion has been tabulated on your screen and the time stamping for the same has been provided in the description section. Presently, India is at inflection point in geopolitical strategy. After the confrontation with China along LAC, India is moving closer to West. To say in the geopolitical parlance, India is moving westward. But India has always maintained that India will never compromise on strategic autonomy. India will never be part of any military or political alliance. So India has always balanced its alignment with West and Asian power. For example, India participated in Quad, that was started after the tsunami of 2004. But India also participated in groups like RIC, then BRICS, then SCO. But this balance sometimes seems difficult. And after the recent border confrontation, there is opinion in many quarters that India should more actively participate in the geopolitical groupings led by US. But on June 23rd, when the confrontation at the border was going on, India decided to attend a meeting of foreign ministers of Russia, India and China under the RIC grouping. This did not go well for many geopolitical strategists because the anti-China sentiment at this point in time was at its peak. But as the author has batted in this article, diplomacy does not go with a knee-jerk reaction or based on public sentiment. Diplomacy considers a century ahead of current time. In this context, this article from page number 6 is extremely important to understand why India should not be moving too westward. The article explains very well the importance of maintaining the strategic importance and the importance of engaging with Russia and China. First of all, you must have observed recent changes in India's geopolitical positioning. India has called to strengthen Quad 2.0. Quad began around 2004-5. Then it was dismantled in 2008. Then it was formed again, dubbed as Quad 2.0 in 2017. But since 2017, there is a request from Australia pending to participate in the Malabar exercise. And India has not taken a decision on this yet. Malabar exercise basically is seen as a theatre for cooperation of the Quad grouping. Malabar exercise began initially as a bilateral exercise between India and US. Later, Japan and Singapore also started participating. Then Australia too joined it. But due to stiff opposition from China, and US needed China around 2008 to get North Korea on table for talks. So US gave in into the demand of China and this whole thing was wrapped up in 2008. So Australia stopped participating in the Malabar exercise but Japan continued later on from 2015. Now many officials in the External Affairs Ministry wants Australia to be readmitted into Malabar exercise. Also in the recent virtual summit between India and Australia, India signed a new military logistic agreement with Australia. And a similar agreement is expected to be signed between India and Japan. So there are many signs of India shifting westward. But however, the External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has clarified that India will never be a part of any alliance. In the past, China and Russia has declared this Quad grouping as a form of Asian NATO. So if India gets too engaged in Quad 2.0 without adequate upscaling of relationship with Russia, then obviously India will be seen to be getting aligned with the Western powers, specifically US. But if we continue to participate in BRIC, that will serve the purpose of showing that India has a strategic independence, and apart from that, there will be an obvious benefit that India can draw from all the major power in the region. See, after disintegration of USSR, Russia was looking for a regional grouping, and talks were going on since early 90s for such a regional grouping, but it could materialize only in early 2000, and hence came into being the grouping called as RIC, Russia, India and China. This was done as a preparation for transition from unipolar to multipolar world, and all three countries did not want the world to be unipolar all the powers being concentrated in US. However, this grouping never projected itself as anti-US. Rather, all three countries had very good relation with US in the beginning. Relation with Russia was manageable until 2014 when Russia annexed Crimea. Until Obama administration, relation with China was also good. Relation with India continues to be good. The cohesion among the three countries in the grouping were on the issue of territorial integrity for social policies and opposition to regime changes from abroad, which was an ever persisting threat from US for Russia and China, not for India. The objective of the group expanded further into global economic and financial architecture. They wanted democratization of global economics, basically targeting World Bank and IMF. And this brought into board Brazil. So RIC became BRIC. And then South Africa will come too, that will make the grouping as BRICS. With the formation of BRICS Bank or the New Development Bank, this idea of democratization of global economic and financial architecture will come to its final logical conclusion. If you see purely from India's perspective, RIC has borne a lot of fruits for India. The bilateral relationship between India and Russia and India and China improved in the initial years of the RIC. With Russia, it continues to improve. With China, the improvement stalled after India went very close to US in 2005 and 6. The bilateral relationship between India and Russia improved on the political front, in defense, in energy, in all the major geostrategic pillars. The Russians have always backed India on the Kashmir issue. There was joint development of BrahMos missile system. Also, there was joint development of 5th generation fighter aircraft and multi-transport aircraft. The progress has been made for licensed production in India of Su-30 aircraft and T-90 tanks of Russia. India has procured INS Vikramaditya from Russia, and this INS Vikramaditya is acting as the aircraft carrier of India. INS Vikramaditya is the only aircraft carrier with India. True or false? India and Russia is also jointly building a nuclear power plant in Bangladesh. You must also be aware of the sale of 98% stake of SROIL to Rosneft. Rosneft is the state-owned oil giant of Russia. This shows the confidence of both the nation in each other. So if you see the trajectory, relationship with Russia kept on improving, but it somewhere got plateaued. If you see from 2000, relationship with Russia has improved. But after 2014-15, after the Crimean annexation, relationship started plateauing. When India diversified its defense procurement with US, Russia went towards Pakistan. Russia saw Pakistan as a good market to sell its defense procurement. Russia also needed Pakistan because Russia was adventuring into Afghanistan. The trajectory with China is very different. Although in the initial years of RIC, the relationship with China improved. It improved till 2005, and after that it got plateaued. And after that the relationship kept on deteriorating, and it has deteriorated to the lowest in the present time. In 2003, India and China decided to bring a political approach to the boundary dispute. And in 2005, there was identified some political parameters that will be applicable in the eventful border settlement. Meaning whenever we will get on tables for border talk, there will be some political parameters that will be considered by both sides. And this implicitly recognized India's interest in Arunachal Pradesh, because these political parameters included strategic and reasonable interest of both the nations, and any border talk should safeguard due interest of their settled population in the border areas. But however, by this time, India got very close to US, and India was in talk with US for a civil nuclear deal. Financial meltdown in 2008 happened, and that gave an opportunity to China to emerge out as a financial powerhouse at global level. After that, the relation between US and China will start to deteriorate, and China will become more assertive. And China will violate this agreement of 2005. So as there was upswing in the Indo-US relation, there was downswing in India's relation with Russia and China. The slope of the downswing was higher, much higher for China. India improved its relation with US. There was surge in trade and investment, there was a landmark civil nuclear deal, and a burgeoning defense relationship. India's objective was to diversify its military acquisition away from total dependence on Russia. And as we have seen that after 2008, China will be expanding its muscle at the global arena. US saw this very early, and US saw the value in partnering with democratic India in Asia. This has been mentioned by various US Secretary of States, and they have written in their books that it was their intention to develop warm relationship with India. However, India also saw interest in developing relationship with US. On the downside, China went back on the 2005 agreement for settling the border issue. China launched China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. This was launched in 2013, but the talk for this started much early. China expanded its military and economic presence in the Indian Ocean and desperately wanted to undermine India's influence in the neighborhood. The result of this you are seeing today. Sri Lanka, Maldives, Nepal, and now Bangladesh. Also, in yesterday's newspaper, you must have read that this China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, now they are planning to extend till Afghanistan. And recently, there was a conference between China, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. There, they discussed this issue. Not only Afghanistan, a branch of this, they want to stretch to Nepal. Similarly, 2004 was the inflection point for the US-Russia relationship after the Crimean annexation of Russia. US imposed sanctions, and Russia's pushback against US included, among many things, cultivating Taliban in Afghanistan. Russia is also very active in the Afghan peace process presently. To cultivate Taliban, Russia naturally needed the support of Pakistan. Russia also did military drills with Pakistan. Russia gave many defense equipment to Pakistan, over which India has raised flags many times. Also, the Western campaign to isolate Russia drove it much closer to China. Surprisingly much closer than what one would expect from their historical ties. Historically, Russia and China had border issue. Relationship was not very warm, never. But US desperate attempt to isolate Russia brought Russia and China very close. Now Russia does not see China as threat the way India sees it. So if we want to roughly graph this thing out, it would look like this. From 2005, relationship with US improved. It improved and we have come to 2020. This is an inflection point. Either we can maintain the same trajectory or we can speed up our improvement and go much closer to US. We can go on path 1, we can go on path 2. This is a graph for Indo-US relation. With Russia, obviously we'll start with a higher base. India shared stronger relation with Russia than US. Relationship further improved and it got plateaued by 2015. Now we are at inflection point with Russia and China as well in RIC and in other groupings like SCO and BRICS. If we go on path 2, then obviously relation with Russia and China will take a dip. This will be the path 2 corresponding to the path 2 of US. Or if we improve our relation with Russia, then the relation with US will suffer. But the problem is, if we improve our relationship with Russia, we have to engage in groupings like RIC, SCO, BRICS, where there is presence of China as well. And there is no possibility of developing a very cohesive relationship with China. So what we can do is, we can improve our relationship with Russia and maintain a manageable relationship with China. So that overall, the relationship with RIC, SCO, BRICS grouping like this improves. And relationship with West, the US through the groupings like Quad, that also improves. So we benefit from both these blocks so that it does not turn out to be a zero-sum game for us. Not going very close to any one of them, maintaining our strategic autonomy will be in the best interest of India. The question that has to be asked is this: if we are not going close to Quad or other US-based grouping, then what benefit can we draw by staying away from US and increasing our engagement with Russia and China? Well, there are many benefits as per the author, and I have added few more. The author says that Shanghai Cooperation Organization is centered on Russia and China. So is BRICS. But Shanghai Cooperation Organization is of special interest for India because it includes Central Asian countries. India has a special interest in Central Asian countries. India also has historic ties with these nations, right from the period of Indus Valley civilization. India also has an air base there. India has a detailed strategic planning to reach to Central Asian nation via Iran, Chabahar port, the onward rail link, the international north-south transport corridor. All of them are the plan of reaching out to Central Asian nations and from there up till Europe. So because Central Asian nation is there in SCO and there are possibility of Iran and Afghanistan getting admitted as member, right now they are observers. But China is in the process of getting into 25-year agreement with Iran. China and Russia also have a special interest in Afghanistan. We just now discussed that China is now considering extending the China-Pakistan economic corridor till Afghanistan. Russia also has a strategic interest in Afghanistan. So possibility is very high that Iran and Afghanistan in near future will be admitted as full-fledged member in SCO. India's interest in Iran cannot be stressed more. India has developed Chabahar port there. India is one of the highest buyer of Iranian oil. India is considering manufacturing fertilizer in Iran and then exporting it from there to elsewhere. Iran forms the gateway for entry to Afghanistan bypassing Pakistan. Iran also forms the gateway for entering to other Central Asian nations. So if Iran and Afghanistan and Central Asian nations are there in a group, India must be there. And India cannot be an active participant without cooperation from Russia and without having a manageable relationship with China. Further, it is also important to shape the China-Russia dynamics, the hegemony that Russia has in this region, and the greater influence that China now is showing in the region. The Central Asian countries have signaled that they would welcome some dilution of the China-China duopoly. The Central Asian nations are ready for a greater engagement of India in the region. And the appropriate forum for India to increase the engagement is SCO. RIC is not only the core of SCO, RIC is also the core of BRICS. India also have to seek the cooperation of Russia because India started this international north-south transport corridor in cooperation with Russia and Iran. And for this to branch to other Central Asian nations, extreme cooperation is required of Iran and Russia. Russia's abundant natural resource is also of interest for India, especially their natural gas. While protecting our interest on border and our sovereignty, we have to cooperate with China on many issues, on technology and even in economy. The bilateral trade between India and China has grown to such an extent that any snapping of ties will prove to be debilitating for Indian economy. What's very important thing about RIC is that Russia is trusted both by India and China. And it's always good to have a mediator between two tussling power. In fact, RIC was the first forum in which India and China had talked after the Doklam standoff. Further, if India goes close to US and start to actively participate in groupings like Quad and J, which is an acronym for Japan, America and India. The problem with this is Japan or US or Australia, they do not have land border with India. And the interest of these nations revolve around Indo-Pacific. The cooperation, the military exercises, the drill mostly is maritime in nature. But India's aspiration is not just to be a maritime power, but both maritime and continental power. None of the nation is likely to intervene directly in case of a land conflict between India and China. What is most important that you must remember is India or any other nation for that matter cannot outsource national security. We will have to manage our national security ourselves. We'll have to be Atmanirbhar in this case. And for that to happen, cooperation with Russia is quintessential. And maintaining a manageable relationship with China is also very important. So the question is, how do we do this? How do we play this geopolitical balancing game? The author suggests that the bone of contention among Russia, China, US is mostly on the issue of Indo-Pacific. China sees the Indo-Pacific initiative of India as part of US-led policy of containing China. Russia sees Indo-Pacific as an American ploy to draw India and Japan into military alliance against China and Russia. Previously, we have seen that both China and Russia dubbed the Quad as Asian NATO. But India sees the Indo-Pacific space very differently. India sees it as a geographic space, having economic and security importance. In 2008, at Shangri-La Dialogue, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has said that India sees Indo-Pacific as a geographical concept, not a strategy or a club of limited members. Now, this could be the line that India can take forward. This is accommodating, non-threatening, equitable stand that India has taken. And if we can convince this to the Russians, then the balancing act will be done. Cooperation between India and China is very less likely. The two nations are competitors. But what we can do is, we can take Russia in confidence and keep cooperating with US. If we do these two things, then China will be managed. We can increase our economic links with Russia. India participated in 2019 in the Eastern Economic Forum, and Prime Minister Modi called for a Look Far East policy. If India can take this Look Far East policy further and develop strong economic links with Russia, then the relationship will be taken to an extent that will come above suspicion and surely survive minor frictions. The concept of Chennai-Vladivostok Maritime Corridor has been developed. This maritime corridor must be activated, and once this is activated, the trade ties between India and Russia will become very strong. And we may persuade the Russians that its interests in the Pacific are compatible with our interest in diluting the Chinese dominance in the region. And this will accord well with the President Putin's concept of Greater Eurasia. President Putin has developed a concept called as Greater Eurasia that will include more nations in the Eurasian Economic Union. This basically is considered as a romantic concept. Russians are going 100 years back when they were very powerful, fantasizing about more hegemony in the region. This has not been kick-started to a considerable extent, but Russians still hold this as an important concept in their geopolitical strategy. So if we can show that this concept of Russia can be taken forward only after diluting the Chinese dominance in the region, that will do the job. So going close to Russia and also to US seems to be a viable way of countering China. But going too close to any one of them will be counterproductive. Because geopolitical dynamics take turns many times. It took turn in 2008. China started to appear at the global stage. It took another turn in 2014, where relation of Russia and US came to a new low. And that affected the relation of India and Russia as well. The third point of inflection can come after COVID-19. We do not know in what shape US will come out of it. US has pulled out of Quad in 2008. US can do it again. Relying too much on any power will not be wise. National security cannot be fully outsourced. There are nations who have done it like Saudi Arabia, and we have known what price they have paid. India has to be Atmanirbhar in this regard. Now we will do this article from page number 1. China says disengagement at most localities along LAC is complete. Also, China has acknowledged for the first time that issues were yet to be resolved at Pangong Lake, and this is likely to be taken up at the 5th round of Corps Commander level talks. In a surprise, Chinese Foreign Ministry was asked by Chinese media to confirm whether Chinese and Indian troops have completely disengaged at 3 localities, namely Galwan Valley, Hot Springs area, and Kongka Pass. And if the only area where disengagement is left to be completed is along the Pangong Lake. But according to Indian experts, disengagement has completed from standoff sites at Patrolling Point 14 in the Galwan Valley and Patrolling Point 15 in the Gogra Hot Spring area. It is only partially completed yet at Patrolling Point 17A, which is another patrolling point in the Gogra Hot Spring area, and is also incomplete in the Pangong Lake. So since the disengagement has only partially happened, the ground situation remains much the same. We will do 2 things here. First, because it's an evolving news, what will happen, and finally whether there will be complete disengagement or not, only time will tell. But we will understand, number 1, the importance of complete disengagement. Not only disengagement, there has to be restoration of status quo. And secondly, on the map we will see some important areas for the prelims exam. From the past experience, we can say that only disengagement will serve no purpose at all. We have to pressurize China to restore the status quo. In the opinion of Ashok Khanta, the former ambassador to China, and he is the director of Institute of Chinese Studies, the government must in no case agree to just de-escalation. There has to be an agreement on returning to the status quo ante, meaning whatever the situation was before the border confrontation happened. Because our experience with Chinese has not been good in Doklam episode. They agreed for de-escalation and disengagement, yet they constructed permanent structure in the area. Doklam standoff happened as the result of China's attempt to build a route near the India-Chinese-Bhutan tri-junction. The area was not in the Indian territory, it was near Bhutan-China border. But because there is India-Bhutan Friendship Treaty of 2007, this enjoins on both sides to cooperate closely with each other on the issue relating to national interest. And whenever Bhutan will run into trouble because of this friendship treaty, India will go to its rescue. So India went. Engagement happened and then disengagement happened. Minister of External Affairs said in the parliament that status quo has been maintained. Disengagement did bring the hostilities between India and China to an end, but People's Liberation Army of China resumed construction activity in the Doklam Plateau just few months after the disengagement. China has constructed permanent structure and has consolidated its position in Doklam. So a repeat of Doklam should not happen in Galwan Valley or Deepsang Plain or Pangong Lake. That is why an agreement on returning to the status quo ante must be in place. You must have these areas imprinted in your mind already, but we'll have a quick revision. This is Pangong Lake, 1/3 in India, 2/3 in China. Some 285 km from here is Galwan Valley. Galwan Valley is the region where Galwan River meets the Shyok River in India. Surrounding Galwan Valley, there are hills. On the hilly region surrounding Galwan Valley, there is a point called as Patrolling Point 14, popularly called as PP14. PP14 overlooks Darbuk Shyok DBO Road. Darbuk Shyok DBO Road runs very close to the Shyok River, then crosses it and reaches to Daulat Beg Oldie Post near the Karakoram Pass. This region, as you can see very clear like a plain, is called as Deepsang Plain. Deepsang Plain is the only region along LAC where tank maneuvering is possible. This region is called as Hot Spring Gogra region. PP15 is nearby Hot Spring Gogra region. There are 8 fingers along the Pangong Lake. From 1 to 4 is controlled by Indian Army and finger 5 to 6 is controlled by Chinese Army. But recently China was laying claim on finger 4 as well. Clearing Chinese from finger 4 and clearing Chinese from 5, 6, 7 and 8 also is crucial because they are shifting their perceived LAC westward and they have brought it from finger 8 to finger 5 already. It's not only important to hold them there but also to push them back. There is a news on page number 1. Rajasthan Cabinet seeks House session on July 31st. There is an impasse in the state of Rajasthan between the state cabinet and the governor. For the third time in 3 weeks, the Rajasthan governor has returned the chief minister's proposal to convene an assembly session. So the question is, who has the right to summon the assembly? Of course, it is done by the governor. But does he do it at his discretion or only at the aid and advice of the cabinet? This is the specific issue that now we will discuss. Prorogation and dissolution of the state legislature is dealt with Article 174. Article 174(1) says, the governor shall from time to time summon the house or each house of the legislature of the state to meet at such time and place as he thinks fit. But 6 months shall not intervene between its last sitting in one session and the date appointed for its first sitting in the next session. Meaning the gap between the 2 sessions should not be more than 6 months. But Article 174(1) has very important phrase in it, as he thinks fit. Now this phrase can be seen in the context of Article 163, which provides discretionary power to the governor. Article 163(1) says, there shall be a council of ministers with the chief minister at the head to aid and advise the governor in the exercise of its function, except in so far as he is by or under this constitution required to exercise his functions or any of them in his discretion. So the chief constitutional question at hand is whether this function of summoning the House falls under his discretion or not. Who will settle this? Supreme Court. The interpreter of the Constitution is Supreme Court of India. Supreme Court in Nabam Rabia and Bamang Felix versus Deputy Speaker Arunachal Pradesh Assembly case has come to a conclusion that the power to summon the House is not solely vested in the governor. And it is a settled question in law that governor cannot refuse the request of the cabinet to call for a sitting of the House for legislative purposes or for the chief minister to prove his majority. In fact, on numerous occasions, for example in Jharkhand in 2016, the court has clarified that whenever there is a question of majority of the ruling party, the floor test must be conducted at the earliest, and that has to be conducted in the House. So now when there is confusion regarding whether the government of Rajasthan has majority or not, floor test should be conducted at the earliest in the Legislative Assembly of Rajasthan. This judgment of Supreme Court was given with a lot of reasoning. In this case, Supreme Court referred to the Constituent Assembly debates and the draft Constitution of India. Supreme Court came to the conclusion that the framers of the Constitution expressly and consciously left out vesting power to summon or dissolve the House solely with the governor. Previously, in the draft Constitution of India, there was Article 153, which later translated to the present Article 174. The power of the governor under erstwhile Article 153 was substantially altered in the final form of the Constitution that we have today. Clause 3 of Article 153 provided that the functions of the governor with reference to the power to summon and dissolve the House shall be exercised by him in his discretion. So clearly, previously the draft constitution gave discretion to the governor with regard to summoning the House. But when Article 153 was adopted to Article 174 in the final form, the clause 3 was not there. It was deliberately omitted. So after discussing the intention of the framers, the court concluded that the only legitimate and rightful inference that can be drawn in the final analysis is that the framers of the Constitution altered this original contemplation and consciously decided not to vest discretion with governor in the matters of summoning and dissolving the House. So the long and short of it is this. Supreme Court in the Nabam Felix judgment decided that governor can summon, prorogue and dissolve the House only on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers with the Chief Minister as the head, not at his own. This is the final thing that you have to know for both prelims and the mains exam. There is a news on page number 1, Centre unable to pay states GST dues. And there is also an editorial article on page number 6, Digging Deeper. This editorial is asking the centre to look for some alternatives like market borrowing through sovereign bonds to pay states GST dues. Although no specific idea has been given in the editorial, but the editorial is asking that the centre must look for something because the states are desperately in need of fund. In the DNS dated 14th April 2020, I discussed with you in detail the centre's delay in the payment of GST compensation to the states. In that video, we discussed about various dimensions which include the mechanism of GST compensation, delay in payment of compensation, and details about the GST Council from the prelims perspective. Since this issue is coming up in news again and again, this becomes very crucial for the coming prelims exam. So make sure you understand the mechanism of GST compensation and the basics of GST Council for the coming prelims. See, recently the centre has paid the GST compensation of around rupees 13,000 crore to the states for the month of March. And it is yet to pay the compensation for the current fiscal year for the duration April to July 2020. But it is in no position to do so because the total money collected by the centre through the GST compensation cess in the previous financial year was around 90,000 crore. However, the GST compensation which was required to be paid to the states was around 1.6 lakh crore. Now this difference was majorly met by the centre withdrawing money from the compensation fund. The cess which is collected that goes to the compensation fund. The purpose of creation of this compensation fund was to compensate the state in case center falls short of the required collection. And this was unutilized in the first 2 years. So money was there, the payment of March was done. Now the money is not there in the compensation fund, an exorbitant amount of money is due. So now the center is clearly saying it is in no position to pay to the states the compensation. And even in the near future, the center won't be in the position to pay the compensation because the GST collection would remain subdued due to the slowdown. On the other hand, people would spend less money on luxury goods, leading to decline in the collection of compensation cess. So because of lower collection of compensation cess from the luxury good, compensation fund will not be filled. And because of lower spending, GST collection anyway is going to decrease. So there is no money, there is no way the center can fulfill the compensation. So there is no money coming anywhere. There is no way center can give the GST compensation to the states. But this can't be stretched for too long because that will impinge upon financial autonomy of the states. Center will have to resort to some sort of market borrowing. In what form it will be done, that will be discussed in the coming GST Council meetings. But some sort of sovereign bonds will have to be released, money will have to be collected, and a state must at least be partially compensated. July 2020 has marked 3 years of implementation of GST. So we can expect some question in the coming prelims exam. This is the graph representing total GST collection in last 3 years. First of all, make it very clear in your mind that there has been no consistent increase or decrease in the GST collection. Then you see from March 2020, the collection for central GST, the state GST, integrated GST, they all started declining. For the first time, the total GST collection crossed 1 lakh crore in April 2018. But after that, there has been stagnation in the GST revenue growth. Before that, there was high growth rate, there was a steep rise in the collection. After that, the collection has stagnated, the growth is almost zero. Then you must note the share of different components of the GST. The highest is IGST. Then we have SGST, then CGST, and then of course the compensation cess. Only so much for now, but you have to keep an eye as to what market measure Government of India will adopt to give the GST compensation to the states. There is a news on page number 1 at 2967, Tiger's capacity at peak. From 2006 to 2018, we have more than doubled our Tiger's number. And now the reports are suggesting that we might be reaching towards the peak carrying capacity. India hosts 70% of world tiger. India is running specialized conservation programs like Project Tiger, targeted specifically for this species, and as a result, the population of tiger has constantly increased in last 2-3 decades. But now it is being suggested that India might be approaching its peak carrying capacity because it has been revealed that nearly a third of India's tiger are living outside tiger reserves. And nearly 17 out of the 50 tiger reserves are approaching peak of their capacity of sustaining the tiger population. See, there will be problems. If tigers are living outside tiger reserve, that will create problem at multiple levels. First of all, their survival rate will decrease. In tiger reserves, in protected areas, special care is taken of nourishment of tigers. For example, black buck, deers, they are specially reared so that easy availability of prey is always there for tiger. So healthy population of tiger is well maintained within protected areas. If they start coming out of it, the survival rate will decrease. There will be increased number of road accidents. There will be increased incident of poaching. There will also be man-animal conflict. So a survey must be done of all tiger reserves, and those tiger reserves who are working with under capacity, they must be made focus area for increasing the population of tigers rather than those who are already itching towards their carrying capacity. There is an article on page number 7, the South Asian migrant crisis. This issue has been dealt in detail in the DNS dated 12th of July 2020 by Baswa sir. So we will not do it here again. This, however, is a very important issue for the coming mains examination. Be sure, absolutely sure, There would be some question touching upon the migrant issue in the coming mains exam. So have a good concise notes on this topic. Now we will do the prelims summary. In the first article regarding Russia, India and China dialogue, we see that RIC dialogue commenced in early 2000. This bore fruit for India. In 2003, China and India took decision to bring a political approach to the boundary dispute. And by 2005, identification of certain political parameters were finalized. For example, strategic and reasonable interest of both parties would be taken care of. Both parties will safeguard due interest of their settled population in the border areas. But in 2005, India and United States did civil nuclear agreement. And from here, everything turned around. China went back on its promise on these political parameters for border dispute. Further, in 2008, global financial meltdown happened. This gave opportunity for China to emerge as a financial powerhouse at global level. And rivalry between US and China will begin from this year. In 2009, however, RIC transformed into BRIC and further BRICS. Another inflection point in the dynamics between India, China, Russia and US will happen in 2014 when Russia will annex Crimea. This will bring the relation of US and Russia to a new low. And this will hurt the Indo-Russian relationship as well. Because of immense sanction on Russia, it will become very difficult for India to continue its trade with Russia. India will be looking for diversification of its defense deal. India will move towards US. Further in 2007, Quad will be revived as Quad 2.0. But since 2017, the request of Australia to be inducted in Malabar exercise is still pending, and India is yet to decide on this. In 2018, an informal grouping called as JAY, Japan, America and India, will be started. In 2019, India participated for the first time in the Eastern Economic Forum. This is an opportunity for India to strengthen its economic ties with Russia. In the same year, a memorandum of intent was signed between India and Russia for Chennai-Vladivostok Maritime Corridor. This is considered to be a master plan by India to restore Russia and strengthen the economic ties with Russia. This is extremely crucial, as we saw in the discussion. To counter China, India has to strengthen relations both with Russia and US. And this is one strategic way of strengthening its relation with Russia because of geographical distance. In January 2020, there is outbreak of COVID-19. In May 2020, there is Indo-China border confrontation. And from here, India is at inflection point. India has to make a strategic decision as to which way it will go. And we have concluded in the discussion that India do not have to go close either to Russia or US. India has to maintain its strategic autonomy, and that is in the best interest of India. In the second article, we saw some important friction points along LAC between India and China. These points are important for the coming prelims exam. You should be able to mark them on a rough map. The underlining learning from the third article was the Supreme Court in Nabam Talik's judgment decided that governor can summon, prorogue and dissolve the House only on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers, not on his own. Regarding GST for the prelims exam, you must observe that the total GST collection has seen ups and downs, and there is no consistent trend. It has not consistently increased or consistently decreased even for 4 months. You must also take note of the order of component-wise GST collection. The highest component among GST is integrated GST. Then we have state GST, then we have central GST, and on fourth number we have the cess component of GST. With this we have come to the end of the discussion. Now we will see question for the day. Now we will do question for the day. Yesterday's question was, consider the following statements about the state of food security and nutrition around the world 2020 report. Statement 1 was, the world will easily achieve the target of zero hunger by 2030. This sounds so incorrect. COVID-19 pandemic will not add more people to the list of undernourished people in the world. It will not add. It sounds so incorrect. The answer would be option D. Question for today is this. If you arrange the following events in chronological order, which one will be fourth in the list? The events are commencement of the RIC meetings, annexation of Crimea by Russia, formation of Quad 2.0, global financial meltdown, Indo-US civil nuclear deal, The first naval exercise between India and United States named as Malabar 1. Formation of SCO. You'll have to work it out, and then the answer you have to select among the 4 given options. I'm sorry, these should be A, B, C, and D. With this, we have come to the end of the session for today. Goodbye, take care.